Now we begin the final chapter of Russian choir, and I believe this is the most important chapter. This is the most important role a Russian choir will have to play in Russian society. As we know, in 1917, the Russian Revolution happened, and this was the revolution that would change Russian society forever. In this revolution, the Imperial Tsar was finally overthrown, the USSR was established, and Russian society changed from the rule of the Tsar to the rule of the Bolshevik government. Now, it was during this revolution that something unprecedented would happen to Russian choir. As we looked at in our history, Russian choir really began exclusively in the churches, and during the Romantic era, because of composers like Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff, that Russian choir moved out of the churches into a more theater kind of setting. But it was during this revolution that the performers would change. No longer were just altar boys singing choir, and no longer were just theater performers singing choir. Everyone was singing choir. The performers changed to the Russian people during this revolution, and it helped to create a sense of solidarity between all these people. And that was because suddenly anyone could write a piece of music, and everyone would sing it right alongside you while they were fighting in the streets. Everyone was singing and fighting together. And it was during this time that some of the best pieces of choir music were composed. Though there was a little bit of a change in subject matter during this time. People weren't exactly on the streets singing choir hymns, O Bože, Tsare, Chrani, which means God save the Tsar. And instead, songs like Krasnoye Zemlya emerged, which means the red flag, or Semlo Mui Voy Poidim, which means bravely we will fight. Now, as some of you may know, the Orthodox Church wasn't exactly treated very well during the Soviet regime, albeit sometimes their policy was a little bit schizophrenic. Sometimes the Soviet government would say, you know, we got to get rid of all the churches, we don't want them anymore, let's get them out of here. Other times they would say, you know what, the churches are alright, we could keep them around. But regardless, a lot of churches were being dismantled, and the role of Orthodox Christianity in Russian society was diminishing greatly. But Russian choir did not suffer the same blow that the churches did, despite the fact that the choir originated from the Orthodox Church. In fact, Russian choir grew during this time, which I find incredibly interesting. The fact was that choir music was so ingrained in Russian culture, even if the source from which it originated was diminishing in power, that did not mean that the choir music was going anywhere at all. Now Russian choir was kind of seen as an arm of the people. It was something that anyone could write for and anyone could sing for. Now the power of Russian choir was really demonstrated in what was easily one of the toughest times for the Russian people, and that was during World War II. For Russia, it was from 1941 to 1945. They know it as the Great Patriotic War. And it was actually during this time that the Red Army christened its own choir segment called the Red Army Choir. Now, the role of choir music was not just solely delegated to the Red Army Choir. It was just a symbol of how important choir music was to the Russian people, that they were willing to cut out a section of their own army and relegate it solely to composing and producing and singing choir music. But all the soldiers were singing in the trenches, all the soldiers were writing songs, all the soldiers were trying to encourage one another and bring each other together through songs, and trying to bring the morale of their fellow comrades up during this darkest of times. It is of my opinion that some of the best choir music ever was made during the time of the Great Patriotic War, or World War II. And I'm going to play two songs for you guys. And some of these songs still move Russian people to tears today. In fact, I had a conversation with a Russian friend of mine recently, and he told me that every time he heard one of the songs I'm going to play for you, he was always moved to tears. Now, the first song I'm going to play for you is called Svященная война, which means the sacred war, and this is the song that moves my friend to tears every time that he hears it. And this song still has an amazing effect on the Russian people, even 60 years after the fact. It still has such a powerful effect for them, and it really is a moving piece of music. And this piece that I'm going to play for you is performed by a choir about 2 years ago in the Moscow Conservatory. I hope that you guys enjoy. Now, the second piece I'm going to play for you guys is called Ich Dorogi, which means, Oh, the Roads, and this piece is actually performed by the Red Army Choir. The Red Army Choir still exists today, actually. It's one of the things that survived the collapse of the Soviet Union and still travels around the world, entertaining audiences worldwide, and you can actually buy some of their music on iTunes, interestingly enough. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this piece as well.
Степной бурьян, выстрел грянет, вон он кружит. Твой дружок в бурьяне не живой лежит.
Now, there's really no question in my mind that Ich Dorogi is one of the most powerful and moving pieces of music that I've ever heard. It's one of the reasons why I believe this period has created the best choir music ever made. And with World War II over, that doesn't mean, of course, choir music is over. There's still plenty of music to write. There's still plenty of songs to sing. Now, you might be wondering where choir music stands in Russia today with the fall of the Soviet Union and the new regime. Choir music is still very popular in Russia. People still go to theaters to hear choirs sing Sveshchenaya Voyna. Their songs are sung very regularly, and songs of the Great Patriotic War are sung often, especially during VE Day. With the fall of the Soviet Union, the Orthodox Church has regained some of its influence in society. Choir music in churches is becoming another popular form of choir music, is becoming strong once again. And choir music in Russia shows absolutely no signs of going anywhere. It is something that I believe will be with its people throughout the duration of their existence. It is one of the most heavily ingrained parts of Russian culture, and absolutely nothing is going to strip that away. And with that, that brings us to the end of our history of Russian choir. We saw how the Orthodox Church was formed, how it can trace its roots all the way back to the ancient Roman Empire, and how the tradition of Russian choir began out of those churches. We saw Russian choir move out of the churches and into the theaters during the Romantic era of composers, and thanks to composers like Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff. And we saw during the Revolution how Russian choir became something that everyone could partake in and something that everyone could enjoy. And today, the Russian choir tradition has helped shape the culture of the Russian people immensely. It has helped change their society immensely and created a great form of nationalism and solidarity among its people. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation, and you all take care.
Малинка моя.